getting a glimpse of what does that mean from a digital transformation.
Sorry about that, guys. I'm going to go back and go quick forward. So not to the boring stuff. Thank you. So why open up your data? Business intelligence, artificial intelligence, machine learning, it all needs data. And you want to be in good with your data science departments so they can advocate for your platform, for your system, for your data. And you want to integrate with devices and become a digital company. You're going to hear that word digital a lot. It's going to be overloaded, but it means kind of have all things around you, bring the data where the user is, kind of thing. So you want to be digital, you need data, you need to serve it out in APIs. So let's talk about SpringBatch. We're here now. Thanks, guys. So SpringBatch, there's a Spring this, a Spring that, and it all started from Spring Core, which is dependency injection. And from there, the group, after they're done with that, they say, hey, what else can we do? So you know what? They've made everything else easy to add on stuff. So it's like kind of like a Ford assembly line, bolting on security, bolting on data repositories, bolting on REST services. So and they call those projects Spring. So anything that is needed in a enterprise, they would create a project for it and solve that problem and nicely integrate it into their framework. So SpringBatch is one of those. At the bottom, I have a link to Spring Gateway. That is their way of having a free, cheap way of using something other than MuleSoft. So they're really doing a great job trying to, you know, have free software that's solid and, you know, basically answer a lot of business questions so you can get solutions quick. Lots of learning. So those links there, you can learn anything you want in Spring. It's very easy. So SpringBatch specifically. Okay, so SpringBatch, it's a Java project. It's built on Spring Core. It's, you know, if you know any Java, even through X pages, you can do SpringBatch. There's no like magic to it. Well, there is some magic, but it's not anything that you touch because frameworks to me are magic because they just tell you where to put your code and it just works, right? They handle all the other heavy lifting. So anywhere a JVM is running, you could run a SpringBatch application. So that means cloud, that means a computer, that means any OS. It moves data between data sources in a consistent manner. So I'll show you how that's done soon. And it could be, data sources could be REST services, databases, flat files, you know, it could be a voice command, whatever you want to, however you want to get to your data. And then it has its own database to track its work. H2 is the default, and the consistency comes because they have solved the problem of, you know, how do I restart? How do I track what's been run already? Where did I leave off? So that's there. And then the other thing we have is processing in between source and destination. So as you're ingesting data, before you send it out to somewhere else, you could totally massage it, reform it to something else that that other system understands, and then save it there. So one use case for this is taking raw data. If you have a flat file database like field 1, field 2, field 3 to, you know, represent a collection, you can actually put that in a collection first before you send it out to the other system. So the other system, you know, gets the entity object with the collections or some complex JSON, or even break it out into flat files. So the manipulating part, that's there. Also in every single aspect, just kind of like X pages where you could compute like all kinds of things in the XML. You can, there's hooks into every part of SpringBatch. So here's kind of a workflow of SpringBatch. So the application starts, the JVM runs the main program, right? And then Spring takes over. And what Spring does is it creates this application context similar to managed beans in X pages, where you have all these global Java objects that get instantiated with the server. And then Spring has annotations. You annotate. So what Spring does is it goes and scans the entire Java project looking for annotations. So then there's like configuration annotations, REST controller configuration annotations. So Spring does a scan of that whole package and starts, once it finds something it knows, it creates a object of it. And then it has all these objects and it reorders them. And it all does it behind the scenes. You never have to do this yourself, but it gets everything ready for you. And then one of the configurations is I'm a SpringBatch project. So one of your classes say enable SpringBatch, and then it reads all the properties and starts your batch program. So there are property files where you could say, no, don't start when you first start the application, right? Do it on demand or wait for a REST endpoint to call it. So you have a SpringBatch application starts, and then you create Java classes for all these different steps, right? So you can define a step to read a file. You could define a step to read a REST service, and then step 3 could mash it together, and you could create all these different flows. And in between each of these, there are statuses. Did I do it successfully or not? And then if I did not, you could skip a record. You could roll back the entire process, so restore everything back to how it was. So it's pretty powerful. And at the end, then the application ends. If it's a REST service, then you have Tomcat running in the background and it's just waiting for another request, or if you have a scheduler. So this is the schema. So when SpringBatch starts, it uses H2 by default, and it creates this database. You don't have to do any database stuff. Everything is done by itself, right? So you get this execution. You get this job execution, job instance. And what you could do with this schema here that they've designed is restartability. You could do intercepting job executions, passing parameters between steps and jobs, chunk processing, which is, if you're processing like 5 million records, you don't want to do it as a 5 million bulk. What they do is they read them in chunks, and then they break up, and then they could parallel process all of these chunks. And then it's smart enough to know where I left off because it has the schema to know this job failed, but like 50 of these records worked. You want to restart those 50 only, you can do all that kind of stuff. Skips, retries, and rollbacks. So the link down here is where I got the schema. It's where all the documentation is. You can go look into that. I always thought that would be fun to create in Domino, but then when I do it, they have all the code behind it and easy scaffolding. All right, so we're 13 minutes in. Let's build a project. So we're going to do just like a workshop, a Java workshop. So we're going to build a project. So to build this project, so let's put together a SpringBatch app, right? It's going to read a CSV file and put it into a database. We have 37,000 records in a CSV file. I'm going to reuse some model objects from my previous session last year, which was introduction microservices with a Domino use case, which is putting Domino behind a Spring Boot API, a microservice. So that's kind of treating Domino as a NoSQL database. We're going to do that. And then one of the requirements here, I used Mongo because it was very easy. It takes 5 minutes to install Mongo. I'm on a Mac, right? So you do brew tap, you tell it what repository to choose, you install Mongo, it downloads it, it starts it up in a mode that you don't get interrupted. You could just write to the database. So you could add on security and other things later. So the concept there is the user experience. So if someone installed, let's say I tried to install Domino in a Docker, it's already like locked down. It's like you don't know. It's now communicating back to you what's wrong and what do you have to do next. If I've never used Domino before, what do I know about server IDs, right? So Mongo, they have a nice, and so does CouchDB. They all have this nice user experience for a developer like that never used it before. Then we're going to use a website called Spring Initializer. So Spring Initializer, you have this web page, you answer a few questions, and you download a Java project. You start adding on to it, basically. You tell it what dependencies you want. You can use any IDE that supports Java, Maven. And I have a resource, I have a CSV file. It actually has 43,000 records here. And I'm going to make a MongoDB connection in my properties file. So when my application starts, it's going to know where to connect. I'm going to add packages, a controller, and all that. So I'm going to come back to this slide. So I'm just going to open up my IDE now. Okay, so this is Spring Initializer. So you come here and you just put in Spring com dot, you put my thing in here, xpages beast collab demo dash Collabsphere. Okay, and then dependencies, you have to add dependencies. So what am I going to add? Well, I want to be able to read a CSV file and write it to a database. So I'm going to use Mongo. So Spring Data Mongo. Let me just grab some notes here for a second. So then I'm just going to move some windows out of the way to make this efficient. Okay, so I'm going to use SpringBatch. Right, and I'm going to say, okay, now I want to use H2 database that's going to store my schema for SpringBatch. And then package it as a jar, Java 11 is fine, Java 2.5 Maven project. Okay, now I just hit generate here. And in my other screen, it downloaded. So I can open that up. I'll bring it over in a second. So here we are, I downloaded it, right? So it's right here. I'm just going to open this with IntelliJ. So I'm going to do file open or file new from existing sources. Go to my downloads, last modified here, Collabsphere, POM XML, open. This window is fine. So what Maven is going to do, once this starts, it's going to download the dependencies. And you can see that, I have like a structure here that's Maven. You have a main Java. Here's my application class. It even created a JUnit test, to make sure the application starts. So pretty much it's scaffolded a project. So the main, in every Spring Boot application, no matter what it is, you have this main method that gets called, and it calls this annotation. What it does is, it bolts on all the Spring stuff and then starts scanning all the packages in here. We don't have any yet or here, and starts putting stuff together. Okay, so next step, we're going to add a Lego Bash config class. So we're gonna first create some packages to hold our stuff here. So new. So people organize their Java projects in different ways. So I'll have a config here to hold some configurations. I'm gonna have a package here for a launcher. And I'm gonna have another one for my model objects, which I'm gonna probably use add model object. I'm gonna probably use one from another project. Okay. All right, so I'm just gonna copy and paste code from my final project, which I'm gonna keep on the side so you can see it coming together. Okay, so first things first. So we need a configuration. So a job configuration. A job configuration kind of configures the application. So there are, right-click new Java class, Lego batch config. Okay, and then I'm going to annotate this to enable batch processing. Okay, so when Spring starts, it's going to find this and it's going to do all the things it needs to do. So add configuration. Okay, that's a general one. It's a Spring config class, and then additional things it does, right? So that's how Spring does its magic. And then I'm going to add a Mongo template. This is also built in. So if you look at here, Spring Framework, they have built a template. This is a interface, and it does the find, CRUD, all those operations for me. I don't have to write them. I just have to use them. And then you have this job and step builder factories, right? And then what you need to do now is you need to start building the readers and writers. So I'm just going to put in a, first I'm going to put in a constructor there. Okay, so I want to be able to read that CSV file, right? So I'm going to put a reader in here. Right. All right, I got errors here. Why do I have errors? Because I don't have a model object. So now what you need to do is, pull in a model object. So I have one from another project that I have. So it's in my Maven M2 dependencies folder. So I'm just going to go to my POM file. And this is how you add on dependencies. And then this little thing comes over here, like IntelliJ tells you, oh, you've made a change here. Can I help you? Yeah, here, download it. So you see right here, resolving dependencies. IntelliJ is pretty awesome. It tells you what it needs, what's wrong. If you have things not tying together between classes, it's monitoring everything you're doing. Okay, now IntelliJ is suggesting, oh, I saw you import that. Should I, or I added that dependency and I can find it, import it. Yeah, I'm going to do a, whoopsie, a keystroke here. Enter. So it's asking me, well, which one do you want? Inside this library that you've asked me to import, I have a CSV and an entity. Well, in that other project that I have one that writes to a SQL database, and then I have one that's from a CSV. They're formatted different. So I'm going to use the one from the CSV. Okay, so that's creating my item reader. Okay, now I need to be, okay, what do I do with this item reader? I need to write something, right? So I'm going to add a writer. So real quick, let me just go through this. So I have this is another built-in thing, flat item reader. I don't need a special CSV reading library. It comes with one. So all I tell it to do is where do you find the file, which I need to, it's going to error out because it's not there. So I will add that in a second. And then you could tell it to skip, right? Reader dot, you can see all these other things it can do. You can map lines, you can set comments, you know, is save state. You have to go through all the documentation, but there's like a whole bunch of stuff a reader can do to get more complex. And then I tell it, what are my columns? Where do I map? Like when it reads the CSV file in that order, where do I map this to my model object? So if I go to the Lego part, a Lego part has a part number, a name, category ID, and the material. Okay. So then I do that, and then I set the field mapper settings. I tell it to use this field mapper that I created, and it's ready. Okay. Item writer, it's very simple too. This is all built in. I didn't have to write any of this stuff. And I set the template DB CRUD operations, which is up here. You see this auto wired? Remember when I said that when your application starts, Spring puts all that stuff in the manage in an application context to XPages developers, it's a managed bean. And then when your application needs it, it automatically wires it to your application. So I don't have to specifically send it through my constructor or set it anywhere. Spring will auto wire. That means it knows how to find a class and attach it, a link to a pointer to that object in memory. So that's what this is coming from. So it's saying use that template, and when I write to MongoDB, put it in this collection called parts. In Mongo, a collection is like a notes view. It's just how do you collect all that data in a collection? And then you have a writer. So then optionally, you can also have a processor. So a processor, here's the basic return that you need to return to the framework. And I didn't copy this processor in, but I need one. So a processor is going to be called on every single read of that record. So it's going to read that bulk of data into the CSV. And then for each one before it writes, it's going to call this processor to do something. So I'm going to create that processor right now. Job package processor. Okay, new class. So we call this Lego part processor. Okay, so this has to implement the same thing, implement something from Spring. So it's an item processor. And where you find out what to do is, using Spring's help and learning things. So once you go through it once, you kind of know what to do. So we import this CSV. Lego parts, close that. Okay, so I'm implementing something. So in Java, in this IDE, it tells you, well, you need to implement these methods. So let's do that. Process item. So you see, this is a framework telling you, well, where do I call your code? So then I'll do this. I'll return a item. I called it item. Let's call it Lego part item. So people who read your code will know what it is. Lego parts. Okay. Okay, so now there's still an error, right? I mean, it'll still compile, but what is this saying here? It's telling me that must be either declared abstract or implement methods process item object. So there's one problem is here. So you see how I added that processor? This IDE tells you, well, you have to go back and import it on this screen. So let's do that. Okay. So Now there's another problem. Item processor, CSV Lego part, item processor model. This is Lego part. Oh. No, that should all be okay. The live demo gods are after me now. So provided Lego part processor, cast to org item processor. Okay. I think there's something up with my import because of that. Lego process. Okay, we'll just leave it at that. And it's telling me I should use this as well. Process item. Okay, we'll use what they tell me to use for the sake of this demo. And Control Z, just the system out. Sorry, this here. We'll cast this. And we'll get rid of this. And then type mismatch, Java X batch, item process do not have type parameters. Oh, it's using this chunk. That's why. There we go. There's two types of processing. One is like just processing with one thread, and then there's that batch what I was talking about where it could do multi-threaded processing. This is not this demo, so it imported that class. You know, I selected on accident, but that was the issue here. So I don't want to do batch because that's not what this demo is. It's more complex. All right, so we coming back here. So we got past that. When you have errors during demos and you watch someone program and get through those errors, that's how you learn like that technology. I love that part of it. So, okay, so we have a batch config, we have a writer, and we have a processor. Now what do we do? Okay, this is the batch config. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna create a step. So what is a step? Step is one of those things you could chain together. Like what do you do per job? So we're gonna put a step in here. And this pretty much step says, get this step. This is like the managed bean name. I keep referring to that because this is more of a Domino conference. And then it's actually, the bean is creating this object in memory. So we're just going to get a handle to itself. And then we're going to do up to 100 records at a time and without parallel processing. And the reader is going to be this brick reader I created right over here. It's brick reader. And then the processor is this one, which I'm going to do the system outs. And then my writer is here. And I'm going to build. This is my writer. So I'm going to write to Mongo. And then this one here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the actual job. So this is the the job factory. So I got these steps, these writers. You can have as many writers and steps as you want. You can put them in different classes, same class. But now I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to create a unique identifier for this job. I'm going to start this step and I'm going to build, right? So that's the entire job configuration. Now you're going to see some magic with this. All right, so let's create a, let's add that CSV file here. I'm going to create a new folder in here called data. And I'm going to copy over that CSV file and we'll take a look at that. Okay, here's a CSV file. So this is 43,000 real Lego parts. These are real part numbers, stickers, right? So let's see how we can handle this data and how we could push it through. So the first step I'm going to do is I'm going to just start this application, see if it blows up. And hit start. Oh, look, it's running. It's reading the file and it's importing it into Mongo DB. 43,000 records in less than 3 seconds. That was pretty cool. So let's see if I lost those log statements. What's happening when Spring starts? So the logs are too big. So one way to stop that is you go to your application properties and you could tell it don't run, avoid running the thing on start, like right here. Now if I hit stop and I start this again, it shouldn't run on start. And it works, right? So let's see what Spring does. Spring starts up, right? You have, this is in information mode. You could do your debugs, see info. You could with debugger get more output. So this starts a Hikari pool. The JP entity started, tells you everything it's doing. It's opening, it's creating this data connections for you. It's saying I started Tomcat on port 8080, right? And Mongo's on 2017. Okay. So another property that you have is this one for whatever database you're working with. If you want the application Hibernate to create the schema for you, let's say you have some Java objects and there's no tables for them in the database. Well, you can have it create the tables for you. So you don't have to do it. Okay. So I'm going to add a couple more things to my properties file. Control C. All right, so I'm going to add it, tell it to write to a database, Bricks2, that's my view. The H2 console, I'm going to say I want a web front end, so I could do SQL queries through a browser on my local host. And every time I turn off this application by hitting the stop here, that database is gone because it's an in-memory database. And this is the path to that database, okay? And then I got some driver connection information here that they'll be used for that front end. And these are all default settings in H2. So I'm going to hit stop and I'm going to restart this again. I'm going to show you the H2 database. Play. So to get to the H2 database, what you want to do is you go to your localhost 8080/H2. That was that path. And you want to log in with the defaults. embedded, it's embedded connect. And this is started because of my application. So if I hit stop here, and I refresh this, nothing happens, right? I have to start it. So what we're going to do is add a scheduler. It's really fast. Let's do that actually, because we're running out of time. So let's add a job scheduler. So to add a job scheduler, all right, add a job scheduler. So we got to create a job launcher. Right click, new Java class, job launcher. Job launcher. Okay. So to add a scheduler, all you have to do is add this add scheduling here, and it's going to run every few minutes, every minute. And the timing of it, I'll show you in a second. Then we got to create. So we got that. Let's just see if it runs start. Okay, we will skip that. We will run a good version of it, hit play. Okay, so you see it ran, it's running. Now connecting to Mongo DB. So watch that console window there. It's going to run every minute. So I'm going to say show databases. I'm going to say use bricks2. And now I'm going to say db.parts.count. How many records do I have in here? Okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 15 million records. So let's see something here. I think 11:45. The other thing you could do is in this project, I have a controller, a REST controller. So using Postman, you can send a request and it's running. You see it over here. And then with the H2 database, let's say I log in with H2. Let me go back to the presentation and show you the job status. We'll do this. So you see I ran it twice. If I do Postman again, send. It's running. If I check Mongo DB, see my record count, is it increasing? I'm at 15 million, should have about 15.6 something or 7. There, so it's increasing. And now here, I'm gonna run this, I should see a third one. See, it's keeping track of all the jobs. So I have, I think, a minute left. Just want to jump back to the presentation. So with Domino, there's some challenges using NoSQL. It's not made for it. So even if you go to Promenade or any other hosting site, they don't do NoSQL storage. The only way to get the data is through REST access, but the project Keep is very interesting. I couldn't get it going. I'm going to try it next year. But getting data out of Domino through like REST or some modern way, REST API is like your best bet. And then all these other storage, so you could take your Domino data, put it into one of these NoSQL storages, and then serve that out to someone else. And then you can use SpringBatch as that conduit between your Domino data and some other database that other systems are already programmed to work with. So a lot of all the other tools out there that everyone's using, there are connectors already built for this stuff. And that's what they're accustomed to using. So thank you. This is my first time doing this presentation, so it's a little fumbly on it. So apologize for that, and thanks for sticking around. Any questions?